I'm going to be using these wire wreath ring forms that you can find at the Dollar Tree. I've only been able to find these once, but I picked up 2 packs of them, and I'm going to take them out to my garage to spray paint them using this Rust-Oleum antique brass color. I just didn't like the color that they came in, but they do sell other colors. I think they come in black, silver, and then this brass color. Next, I'm taking this reindeer that I also found at the Dollar Tree, and I started painting it with my black chalk paint. However, I always find chalk paint to scratch off of surfaces like this pretty easily unless you seal it either after you're done painting, in between coats, but put some type of sealer on it, and I just didn't want to go through all of that. So instead, I decided to spray paint it with my Rust-Oleum flat black spray paint. While I wait for all of my paint to dry, I'm taking this scrap piece of wood that I had laying around. It is 7 inches long, 1.5 inches wide, and 1 inch thick, and I'm going to find the center of my scrap piece of wood. Now, you do not have to use a scrap piece of wood if you don't have something like that for this step. You could use floral foam, you could use Jenga blocks. Dollar Tree also sells scrap wood right now, although you can get it much cheaper at the hardware store, but that's a story for another day. Point is, you can use other things if you do not have random scrap wood just lying around. I marked on my wood where the ring was going to sit at, and that's where I'm going to create a little slit in the wood. If you were using floral foam, you wouldn't need to do this step. You could just push that wreath ring down into the floral foam, glue it in place, and you're good to go. Or if you used Jenga blocks, you could just glue them on either side of the wreath ring to hold it in place as your base. I'm using a wood burning tool to create my slit. Probably not the easiest method, but it's all I could find at the time. You could also use a small chisel or a knife depending on how hard or soft your material used for the base is. Once I had my slit cut out, I'm just taking my Starbond super glue. I love this stuff. I have it linked in my description box. And then with the accelerator, I'm just going to hold it in place until it dries. Now I'm just taking some burlap to cover up the base and kind of hide where we have everything glued together, and then I'm going to hot glue it in place. My camera battery died, but you get the idea. I just basically wrapped it like a present using my hot glue. Then I'm going to glue my little reindeer down in place. I put him right on the very edge of the left side of my wood base, and then I'm going to take these floral picks that I got from Walmart in the 98-cent section. I love their Christmas floral picks. They have the best quality and they are so affordable, but I'm going to take out the berries and that additional little greenery flocked piece. I am going to use the additional greenery part, but not the berries at all. Then I'm just taking some floral wire and I'm going to wrap it around the wreath ring, holding my picks in place. And lastly, I am just adding in these macrame snowflakes that I made. I did not show them in this video, but stay tuned until next week because I have a whole macrame ornament video coming up. I'm sorry my shoulder is completely in the way here, but I'm just measuring how tall I want my houses to be from the base to the peak of the roof. And I ended up getting this $20 fence post for only $2 from that 70% off section at Home Depot. Such a great deal. To cut them down, I'm using the big monster chop saw. And after I have my 6 blocks, I need to change the angle of my saw blade to cut the roofs. I did a few of them at 45 degrees and a few at 30 degrees. Since these wood blocks are pretty small, I didn't want to hold them, so instead I grabbed a clamp to hold the block against the saw fence, and then I can safely cut the angles for the roof. This saw creates so much dust. I wish I had a dust collector, but R2-D2 will have to work for now to clean up. Next, we need to sand everything down, and since this fence post was so rough, I used my orbital sander with an 80 grit paper. After the houses are pretty smooth, I'm going to paint them. 2 I painted with my favorite fawn color right now, watered down. 2 I watered down a white for a whitewash, and then 2 are solid black. Now I'm going to add holes into the roof for my chimney using my 7/8 inch spade bit. I needed the hole to be at an angle, and I found the easiest way to do this is to go in straight to start and then gently raise your arm while you're still drilling to create the angle for the chimney so it's straight up and down. Then using this 3/4 of an inch copper pipe I had the leftover from the last candlestick holder I made, I will link that video if you haven't seen it. I'm going to take my pipe cutter and cut this down for the chimneys. All that's left to do is add the candles. So here's the Pinterest version and mine. I love how minimal and modern these look. I'm starting out with this frame, which I picked up from Habitat for Humanity probably about a year ago and had turned it into a display shelf, but I'm no longer using the shelf and wanted to repurpose this. If you want to see how I created the original shelf, I will link that video in the description below. But the frame is 17 inches by 14 inches, and I'm cutting down a piece of foam core board to be my backing. Next, I bought this chunky sweater from the Goodwill and cut out the back of it. This is going to be the background, and I just love the texture and cozy vibe that this adds. To attach the sweater, I'm using my Gorilla hot glue, and to make sure I got the sweater to look straight, I took one of the straight lines on the knit and used that as my guide. So after gluing the bottom, I went to the top. That way I didn't end up stretching out one side more than another, and was careful not to pull the sweater too taut to shift the pattern on the front of it. Once all of the sides were glued down, I cut off the excess and glued the frame on top. Now to add the detail, I had this almost perfectly sized scrap piece of leather and just cut it down slightly so it measures 12 inches by 4 inches. But I didn't really care for the color, so I'm taking several different paint colors and a sponge and just experimenting, playing around until I get the look I'm after. Next, I cut out the word believe with my Cricut, and I used the font Agency FB. I'm going to use this as a stencil. I like using Dollar Tree contact paper to make my stencils to keep the cost low for something I'm just going to throw away. I always forget to make sure there's a border around stencils, so no surprise here, I forgot to do that. Learn from my mistakes. Make sure you add a rectangle, a circle, a square, whatever the shape of your stencil cutout is going to be. I ended up having to add some painter's tape so that I wouldn't get the paint on my leather where I didn't want it. Oh my gosh, you guys. Next, I made such a mess. I forgot I had already opened the lid of my black paint, picked it up to shake it, and yeah, I'm sure you can guess what happened next. It went all over my project, my hand, my craft mat. What a mess. But I recovered, cleaned it up, added the black paint to my stencil using a sponge dabber. And then after I added the stencil, I went back and fixed the part of my leather where the black paint had spilled on it, and it looks good as new. Nothing ever happened here. Now we just need to attach the leather to the sweater. I used my hot glue again for this. And added one last detail with these nail head trim pieces I had on hand to each corner, and that was it for this one. If you couldn't tell by my last two Christmas videos that I have posted so far this season, I am going for a very cozy, natural materials, Scandinavian neutral vibe this Christmas, and I'm absolutely loving it. For this project, I picked up this little Dollar Tree mailbox and painted it white. I gave it 2 coats of paint, and I almost ended up giving up on this project, but so glad that I didn't. So I created these decals on my Cricut. I have them available to download on my website, which is linked below, but one side says special delivery, check twice, and the other side says North Pole Post, naughty or nice, and there's little check boxes next to the words. But initially, I was using the Cricut transfer tape on these, which I no longer use because it's just way too strong and it was ripping all of my paint right off. I was so frustrated. So I ended up walking away, went to sleep for the night, and came back the next day to use my clear contact paper, which was so much easier. Next, I took some washi tape and added some ticking stripes along the rounded side and also along the bottom of the mailbox using my crimson color paint. I also added some check marks onto the check twice and then next to nice, but I don't think I recorded that part. Then I took a piece of scrap wood from my garage and this empty deco mesh tube to use as a stand for the mailbox. You can see I painted those red as well, and I just used hot glue to attach the pieces for this one, but you could use something stronger like E6000 or super glue for a better hold. I don't think I show it, I don't know why, but I added some white glitter ribbon from Dollar Tree that wraps up the post for some additional detail and little sparkle. There was no way I was getting that mailbox into the frame, but that's it for this, and I think it is so adorable. I'm starting out with some scrap wood from my garage and ripping the boards down to make them a little bit more narrow. I ended up with 2 pieces that are 13 inches by 3 inches and one 11-inch by 3 inch. Then I'm taking these even skinnier wood pieces. These are scraps from when my husband makes his flags, and I'm going to cut them down to be the brim of my snowman's hat. A square dowel would work just as well. Using my wood glue, hot glue, I'm adding the wood pieces on at an angle. Now we can paint. I'm using ivory for the body and black for the hat, using a small detail brush for the brim where it meets the body. Now I probably could have painted the brim before gluing it down, but apparently I didn't think about that. Next, I'm going to work on their noses, and I knew I wanted to use air dry clay for this. I have this Crafter's Square terracotta color clay from the Dollar Tree, and as soon as I opened it, I knew it was not going to work. The clay was super dry and crumbly. It would not smooth out. So I looked at the directions and it said you could add water to smooth it out. So I dipped my finger in water and added a tiny little bit at a time. That did help to smooth the clay, but I was not confident this was going to look good once it dried. So I also have this tub of Crayola terracotta air dry clay, and right away this looked much smoother. So I took a small amount of clay and rolled it into a ball with the palm of my hands, then started rolling it out like a snake. And I pressed one end of the snake against the table to flatten it and continued to roll out the other end to form a cone shape. And once I had my cone shape, I bent it a little bit to look more authentic, like a carrot. And here you can see how the Dollar Tree clay dried compared to Crayola, which turned out much better. While Crayola is not my favorite type of air dry clay, the terracotta one actually looks really nice. To add the clay noses, I found the center of my snowman, which was 1.5 inches, and then added a dot of my Starbond super glue and dried it with the accelerator. I do have this product linked in my description box. It is my favorite type of glue when you need a strong hold and don't want to wait for the dry time like E6000. Next, I'm taking this fabric quarter that I got from Walmart to make a scarf. I folded the fabric over 1/2 inch and used my hot glue to secure it down. This way the pattern will show on both sides of my scarf. And then using my rotary cutter and an L ruler as a guide, I cut right along the edge and made 3 scarves just like this, then tied them around my snowman using hot glue to tack it down where needed. Now the snowmen are complete, but the Pinterest inspiration had them sitting in a bucket. I've had this Dollar Tree galvanized bucket on hand and removed the twine. I'm not going to use the twine today, but did hold on to it for a future project. The galvanized tin does not exactly go with my decor, so I'm using some spray paint to change it. I used antique brass, hammered burnished amber, and hammered black, just misting them lightly over the bucket and layered each color while it was still wet. And I love the rich color this turned out using that technique. Next, I'm taking this faux fur ribbon I got on clearance last year after Christmas. That's when you can find some of the best deals. And I hot glued it around the top of the bucket, allowing half of the ribbon to stick out above the bucket, and then folded it inside for a cozy vibe. Now my version is a lot less rustic than the Pinterest one, so this is more inspired by it than a dupe, but what do you guys think? I'm duping one of the metal word signs from Magnolia, and I'm taking these skewer sticks from the Dollar Tree. They're the small ones that are out all year long, and I'm going to start measuring them out to the size I want my letters to be. I started with one of the E's because I thought that would be the easiest letter for me to gauge how tall I wanted them to be. The vertical line of my E is 3 inches tall, and the horizontal lines are 2 inches. Once I had the skewers cut, I'm using my Starbond super glue with the accelerator to attach them together. I thought this glue would work the best with how tiny these skewers are and give that immediate hold once you spray the accelerator. I do have this product linked in my description box if you're interested. I continued to do this for all of my letters, cutting them down and gluing together until it spelled out peace. Once I had all of my letters, I'm taking 7 tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree and gluing them in a line. Then I glued the letters on top of the blocks. All that's left to do now is paint this to look like metal using Rust-Oleum hammered black spray paint. Now let's take a look at how mine compares to Magnolia. I had the supplies already on hand, but if you had to buy them, this would cost $2. The Magnolia version is 9 inches tall. I probably should have checked that before making mine, so mine could have been a little bit taller, but I still think it looks pretty close. But what do you guys think? For this project, I am using one of the medium-sized rings. I forgot to mention in the first project, I used the largest size for that one, but I'm taking some jute twine. This is the Dollar Tree twine, so it's the really thin stuff. You could use the thicker twine if you wanted to. I tested that one, didn't really like the look of it. It was a little bit too thick for this project, but I just hot glued the end down around itself around the ring, and then I'm going to wrap it around the center several times. Once I'm happy with the amount of twine I have, I just hot glued it down, cut off the end, and then I'm taking a lighter to singe off all of those little frayed bits on the jute twine. If you're not comfortable with this step, do not do it. It is not necessary. If you like that more rustic look, I would leave it just how it is. Next, I cut out the word winter with my Cricut, and I'm going to place them onto these 18mm beads. And I did not think when doing this step, you guys, I put them on the wrong way. The holes for the beads should have been sideways instead of up and down.
Oh my god, I'm so dumb.
But I decided to string them along my jute cord before fixing them, and I just added a little dab of hot glue to the end of my jute twine before stringing it through my beads. It makes it a lot easier that way because they are kind of rough through the center and sometimes your string can get stuck. So once I had all of my beads strung up on the jute twine, then I fixed my stickers and made them face the correct direction, and then I added a little dab of hot glue in between each bead as well so that they would stay in place and not move around. Then I just hot glued my jute twine with my winter beads down in place, and then I'm taking some various picks that I just have lying around and I am weaving them through the jute twine until I am happy with the look. And that was it for this one. Super simple and so beautiful and modern. I just love it. For this project, I'm making some light up present boxes, which I ended up making it a little bit complicated. There was definitely an easier way to do this, but anyways, I have a bunch of this thin scrap wood in my garage from when my husband creates his wood flags, and I thought they were perfect to make a cube. I used 12 6-inch pieces, 12 9-inch pieces, and 12 12-inch pieces to create 3 different size presents. I glued the pieces together, creating 2 squares using my wood glue, and then also my brad nails for a more secure hold. But this wood was so thin, it was really difficult to get the brad nails into the wood, so I had to have my husband to help me with that part. But once you have the 2 squares, then you add the remaining 4 pieces to the corners of 1 square, and put the second square on top to create that cube present shape. And I'm sorry, I have no idea why I didn't record that process, but here's how they should look, and I spray painted them black. But I think it would be easier to use a cardboard box and just cut out the center for each side to get this same look and save yourself some time. Next, I'm taking some fairy lights from Dollar Tree and stringing them up inside of the box. I attached them to the side where I wanted them to stay with some duct tape. Now to cover the boxes and make them look like presents, I'm taking this deco mesh from Family Dollar and wrapping it around so that the stripes in the mesh are going vertically to start. Once I have this section done, I go around the opposite direction with the stripes going horizontally to create kind of a grid pattern. And this mesh and ribbon were all I had to buy for this project, so it cost me about $8 to make, where one of these present boxes can cost upward of $60 to $100 at the store. Last, I'm taking some ribbon to wrap around the boxes. I bought this black ribbon specifically for these, but didn't realize just how big that largest present would be. So I ran out of the black ribbon and pulled some buffalo check ribbon from my stash to add some variety. My husband was fascinated with watching me do this part because I am not the best bow maker. I can recreate pretty much anything I look at, but bows are just so difficult and foreign to me. So I just created loops and I would hot glue them down in place to stay until I was happy with how it was looking. But then I just dovetailed the ends. I really love how these turned out. This project exceeded my expectations. I had this idea in my head but wasn't sure how it would look, and it is awesome. I found this copper oval planter at a thrift store when I was on vacation in Virginia over the summer. I paid $3 for it, and I'm just going to start out by getting those tags off and then giving this a really good cleaning. I forgot to mention in the first project, I did not clean that metal flower because I didn't want to remove any of the tarnishing that was already on there. But for this copper piece, I did want to give it a nice cleaning. Next, I'm taking some just Dollar Tree plastic bags and I'm going to fill the center of this so that it gives a little bit of height and I don't need to use as much filling. And then I'm taking this just cotton batting that you would use for upholstery, and I'm going to cut it down so that I can then kind of tuck this around those plastic bags that we inserted into the planter. And this is going to act as our snow. Next, I am taking these bottle brush Christmas trees that I bought in a variety pack last holiday season from Walmart. There were 2 larger trees, some medium trees, some smaller trees, just a really nice variety. And I'm going to start hot gluing those down on top of our fake snow just to add a little wintry forest scene inside of this copper planter. Super easy again, and I love the way this turned out. Metal is super trendy right now, so all of my projects today are going to incorporate some type of metal. But next I took another strip of my batting and I just kind of tucked it up underneath of my trees to add a little bit more snow detail, also covering up that plastic bottom of the trees that came on them. And then this just adds like an even more snowy effect. And that was it for this one. Again, so simple, and I love the way this turned out as well. Next up, I found this adorable sled at Goodwill for $2.99, and I'm going to start by cleaning it off, and this is going to be another really easy project. I cut off the twine because it had definitely seen better days and gave the whole thing a scuff sand just to scratch up the surface for the paint to adhere better. I know there are people who believe you do not need to prep a surface for sanding prior to adding chalk paint. However, I like to take this added step just to ensure my project is going to last longer. After sanding, I use my little tabletop vacuum to clean up the dust. I love this thing. It is linked in my description box. And then taking my favorite paint color at the moment, Fawn by Waverly, painting just the rails of the sled. Is that what they're called? I'm not sure. For the top of the sled, I'm using Ivory by Waverly. I did have to give the top 3 coats of paint to cover up that orange wood tone. I'm not a big fan of distressing, but I do think some pieces look good with it. This was one of those pieces, so I took a 220 grit sandpaper and took off the white paint to show some of the wood underneath, adding to that natural vibe I'm going for, and just on the edges of the sled. I love the Scandi forest inspiration I've been seeing lately and wanted to add some thin little trees to this decor piece. So I started out with a pencil but quickly abandoned that and just went in with a thin black Sharpie to keep it feeling organic. After I was happy with the trees, I added a new twine hanger, knotted it in the front, and then burned off the frayed bits. If you're not comfortable with this step, don't do it. It's not necessary. I just like the way it looks, but that was it for this one. I'm starting out with this Craft Smart polymer clay, which you can find at Michael's. I cut off a chunk and then rolled it out to condition the clay and make it softer. Polymer clay is definitely stiffer at first than air dry clay, but once you condition it, I actually think it is much easier to work with than air dry clay. Now I'm going to cut a slice of my rolled out clay and roll it out in my hands to make a snake. I made 14 of these snakes, making pairs of the same size and then gradually getting shorter. Once I have all of my snakes rolled out, I'm going to start making circles to stack on top of each other. I did make sure to keep the seams all in the same spot so that that could be the back. And I'm making a little tree here. I really wanted it to be quirky and not perfect, so as I was stacking the rings, I made them shift to the left and then to the right to make it look a little bit more whimsical and fun. I did have to cut some of the snakes a little shorter as I went. In that case, I made my circle, placed it on the tree, and then sliced it where I wanted the circle to close. For the top of the tree and the last snake, I wrapped it around in a spiral to finish off the top. And then I took some more clay, rolled it out, and used a little metal star that I have for an outline. pressed it into the clay, and then cut that out. I know you can't really see what I'm doing here, but I just stuck it on top of my tree and then baked it in the oven at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. I like to turn off my oven but leave the piece in there to slowly cool down, and this is supposed to help keep your clay project really strong. And you could absolutely decorate this however you wanted, paint it up, add little clay ornaments onto it as well. I wanted to keep it super simple and white, and that was it for this one.
This project, I am taking a 1x8 board and I'm cutting it down to be 12 3/4 inches long. I didn't feel like getting out my big chop saw to do this, so I just flipped the board over and cut it twice with my miter saw. Next, I'm going to take it over to the table saw and we're going to rip it down into two 3-inch strips so that I have two 3-inch by 12 3/4 inch boards. Now, when you buy a wood board from the hardware store, it is not the exact measurement that it says. So even though this is a 1x8, it actually ends up being about 3/4 of an inch by 7 3/4 of an inch. But what I had left over was roughly a 1.5 inch piece after I cut down those two 3-inch strips. And I just cut that down to be 3 inches as well. Next, I'm going to take this inside and give it a light sanding just to get off any of those rough spots, and then clean it up with my tabletop vacuum, which I have linked in my description box. Next, I'm going to take one of my 3-inch by, let's just call it 13-inch boards, and I'm going to find the center of it. Then I'm going to space out every 2 inches from that center point and make a mark, because we are going to drill some holes into this board, but only one of the boards, not both of them. I have this little copper piece that I cut off of a pipe, and this is what I'm going to use for my guide of how big I want the holes, because this is the exact size of the pipe we are going to use later. Next, I'm taking a spade bit and I'm using the 7/8 inch size. I just got this little set from Walmart for about $12, and the pipe that we are using is 3/4 of an inch, but I need this 7/8 inch drill bit or spade bit because we need the entire pipe piece to fit through this board. Only the center of that pipe is what is the 3/4 of an inch. And we're just going to drill our holes where I made all of the marks. And you want to drill your holes before we glue everything together. So after I have all of my holes drilled, then I'm going to take my wood glue. And I also have this amazing wood glue dispenser linked in my description box. I got it from Amazon, but I'm going to start out gluing my two 1.5 by 3 inch pieces to one of my 3 by roughly 13 inch pieces. And then I'm going to glue the top piece on, which has the holes we drilled out. Once everything's glued together, I'm going to clamp it together, and I did leave it clamped together for a few hours until it had a nice secure hold. Next, we need to cut down our pipe. So I got this 3/4 of an inch by 5 foot pipe, copper pipe from Lowe's. It was about $14, and I have plenty of this left over for additional projects. Then I'm going to take this pipe cutter, and we are going to use this to cut down our section. So I started out with a 5-inch piece, and I'm going to put my pipe cutter right where I need to make the cut. And this thing is super easy. I did this in real time for you so you could see just how easy it is. The way you use this thing is you clamp it down tightly, twist it around a few times, screw it again so that it gets a little bit tighter on your pipe, twist it around a few times, tighten it, twist it around, and you keep doing that until the pipe completely cuts apart. And it is really easy to do. You guys know I have the weakest hand strength, and I was able to do this without any issues. Once you have your piece cut off, there is going to be some like jaggedy pieces from the cutter. Definitely do not stick your fingers in there. It is very sharp, but the cutter also comes with this little part on top where you can just rub the inside of the pipe around it and it will smooth it out for you. So I cut down 2 5-inch pieces, 2 4-inch pieces, and 1 3-inch piece, and then I just added some tapered candles on top, and here we have our beautiful and modern tapered candle holder. So what do you guys think of this one? It was super easy to put together, and I just love the high-end look of it.
For this project, I am taking a medium and then a large wreath ring, and I'm going to glue them together where the edges touch using my Star Bond super glue. Hot glue is not going to work here. It does not stick to metal. You could also use E6000, but then you'd have to wait for that to dry. Gluing the sides is also going to help with this next step. I'm going to be taking this chenille yarn. I believe I got this from the Dollar Tree, but I really can't remember. And we're going to use this to start wrapping it around the rings. And that's why you want to glue those two ends together. Otherwise, your rings are just going to start moving around with you as you start wrapping the yarn. I'm going to wrap my yarn all the way around the rings, kind of forming a moon or crescent shape. And I really did not need to use much hot glue here. I used it at the very beginning to tack the yarn down to the metal rings. And then as I started going down the second side, I needed to use a little bit more glue more frequently than I did going up on the first side. And I think that was just because of gravity and wanting to pull it down. Next, I'm taking this Mary MDF sign that I got from the Dollar Tree. I got this last year, but they are carrying these again this year as well. And I'm taking my Fawn Waverly chalk paint. This is my favorite color right now. I have been using it on so many projects, but I'm going to give this Mary sign one coat of the fawn colored paint. And then I'm going to take my black chalk paint and I'm going to paint all the way around the border of the Mary sign. So this part is definitely time consuming, but I think details like this really elevate your projects, making them look more like they were purchased in the store, which is really what I'm always trying to achieve in my DIY projects. I also found that doing the inner portion of the words, it was helpful to come from the back and then fill it in that way, so I wasn't worrying about getting the black chalk paint on the front of my word and then having to go back and try and cover that up with it being so dark. I thought it was still missing a little bit of detail, so taking this embossing tool, I also picked this up from the Dollar Tree, and then the color Warm Buff, which is an apple barrel acrylic paint, and I'm just adding some stitching marks all the way around the outside and then also the inside little portions of my letters. And I think this was the perfect finishing detail for this word. Next, I just hot glued my MDF sign down on top of the yarn, and that worked fine. This isn't very heavy, so the hot glue works for this part. And then I'm just taking some greenery pine that I have. I actually got this on a garland from Hobby Lobby, 50% off. I absolutely love the realistic look of it. And then I took these mini pine cones that I also got from Hobby Lobby, added them in sporadically, and that was it for this one. I absolutely love the way this turned out. For this project, I am creating a watercolor tree that I saw on Magnolia's site. I have these real brush pens from Arteza. They're really cool. With the tip being a brush, you can make thick lines, thin lines, vary the width as you write, almost like calligraphy. You can also dip the pen into water to make them watercolor markers. I have the 48-piece set, and this also came with a water pen, so you can draw what you want and then go back and add the water. There are some really fun and cool things you can do with these. Now, I'm no artist, but I did practice this tree for a few days before actually sitting down to record it so that I could figure out what the best technique was. I started with my color that was the lightest when watered, which is the color Crocodile Green, and I made sure to keep dipping the pen into the water before applying it to the paper to make sure it would stay that light color. And then looking at the image from Magnolia on my phone, I just started drawing, trying to make the shapes I thought I was seeing. It looked to me like the brush strokes were kind of going up and down while also moving horizontally across the paper to give that tree branch look, and I hope that makes sense. On Magnolia's site, they do say this piece is handmade and each one is made to order, which I just love, but also no two are going to look the same. I tried to keep that in mind when my perfectionist brain kept getting frustrated that mine didn't look exactly like the Magnolia version. About 80% of my tree was done using this crocodile color. I just kept layering it up so it had different dark and light shades. The other two colors I added in were olive green and seaweed green. And I used seaweed green the least. It was a little bit brighter than I had wanted for this project. I actually didn't love any of the colors that I had to work with. I think they look pretty different from the Magnolia version, but it still turned out pretty well. Once I was pretty happy with how the tree looked, I grabbed these scrap wood pieces that I had from another project, and I'm going to use these as a border. I know the Magnolia version does not have a frame and there's a lot more white space, but I liked how the frame looks around this. And here's my version, which I would consider free since I've had these pens on hand for a while, and the Magnolia version, which is $140, but I completely understand that price given that each piece is handmade to order. What do you guys think? Would you ever try something like this? For this project, I'm taking 2 of these long MDF signs from the Dollar Tree and removing the paper and any little embellishments that were on them. And then I needed a third board, so I grabbed a scrap piece of floorboard that was in my garage, and I did end up cutting them all down to be the same size later on. Next, I'm taking my Waverly Antique Wax to cover all 3 boards. The floorboard did turn out a little bit different than the Dollar Tree MDF boards, but I liked having that variation with 2 different shades. Then I took my white paint and very lightly dry brushed it here and there. Now I'm going to draw on some little trees, doing a different design on each board. For this first one, I'm making triangles and then get a little bit bigger as they go down. I got this idea from Pinterest. These wood board trees were really popular a few years ago when I made these. I love this project. It's very customizable and budget friendly to make. There are tons of different tree options you can create. For some more detail on this tree, I took the bottom of a few different size paintbrushes and added some dots to act as ornaments, as well as a little star on top. For the next tree, I'm creating a line right down the center of the board, and it's okay if that's not perfect. I wanted these to have a very handmade look and feel to them. And then I'm making little swoop branches, and again, as you go down the tree, each branch gets a little bit longer. For the third tree, I wanted it to have a wood slat look, and initially I drew the lines on with a pencil, but when I started adding the paint, I realized I had made the lines a little bit too close together. So as I started going down, I would skip some of those pencil lines so it looked a little bit better and more like what I was going for. Then I added the outline of a star on top of this tree. And last, I took some baker's twine in this tan and white combo to wrap around the top and the bottom of two of the boards. And then for the third board, I added twine. So here was my inspiration, which cost $98, and I completely get that because it is a nice solid wood and handmade element to it, but we recreated it for only $2.